We've all watched that scene and a river runs through it. Brad Pitt and company wading in the water, throwing a line out in pristine Mother Nature. That healing peace is being brought to our veterans through Project Healing Waters fly fishing. We're joined by Charleston's program lead, Gerald Minetti and Peter Dinicola. Great to have you both with us.
Thanks for having us.
So tell us the story behind how this organization got started.
Sure. Project Healing Waters actually started at Walter Reed Medical Facility in Washington, D.C. The gentleman that started it was a retired Navy captain. He was going for cancer treatment, and he saw all of these soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines that were suffering with either PTSD, traumatic brain injury, loss of a limb, and he thought, maybe I take a couple of them out fly fishing and see if that helps open them up.
Yeah.
Bring him back to normalcy, and so he did. He saw it was very effective, very therapeutic, and then said, now I'm going to sit him down behind a vise to see if we can tie some flies. Now that takes a lot more concentration. He saw that they opened up, started talking to one another. Gee, where did you get wounded? Well, I was in Afghanistan. Well, where in Afghanistan? Well, gee, our unit replaced you. And said, I think this has a chance to becoming a great 501c3 nonprofit. So today we have about 200 programs throughout the United States supporting about 9,000 disabled veterans.
Wow, and Charleston is one of, I think, probably the best places to come and do fly fishing. I know we're a little biased, are we?
we can do a lot of saltwater fishing here. Almost every pond in the area has some kind of fish in it. And then we take our participants out of state a couple of times a year to fish for, say, trout in Helen, Georgia.
Yes.
And Peter took 11 of our participants over there in November, and they had just a great time, except it was so cold.
We don't like the cold so much here in the South, but Jerry, you served this great nation in the Army, and Peter, you also served our nation. Tell us a bit more about your service.
So I served 28 years in the U.S. Coast Guard. That's how my family and I came to Charleston. We got stationed here in 1998, and we kind of chose it strategically. Our girls were going into middle of elementary school age, and we figured it'd be a good spot to raise a family, and it's worked out great. And we've been here ever since.
Well, thank you both for your service, and I want to hear, Peter, as someone who was with the Coast Guard, but also taking these veterans out onto the water and to fish, and what is that experience like? Can you describe?
It's fantastic. Jerry and I both got started with Project Healing Waters in 2015. Jerry started as a participant, and I think I was one of the first volunteers that worked with Jerry. I remember that day over at Park West when we were doing a little fishing.
Yeah.
Anyway, fast forward, and in the 7-8 years we've been working together with Project Healing Waters, our program's grown from just a handful, maybe a dozen people, to almost 80 people now that we help.
Wow.
And most recently, as Jerry mentioned, we got to take a group over to North Georgia to fish for a week, and it was very cold, but the fishing was still good.
What is the reception? What is the reception from veterans who go out there and they say, wow?
It's, you know, it's pretty amazing. It's different for each one, I think. Some get just the idea of getting your mind off your struggles with the concentration it takes to tie a fly or build a rod or do the fishing. For others, it's just the camaraderie. It's almost a social thing, just to get together a couple times a month to be with people with like interests. It's for people who like to fish, even if you've never fished before. If you get involved with us, you may learn a new hobby that you love, and again, something if you're struggling, just to help you.
So you brought with us a couple of examples. So this is your box of flies that you've tied yourself, which are beautiful. These flies are beautiful and very intricate, and I can imagine you have to have some steady hands to make some of the tinier ones. And then you were also mentioning, Peter, about building the rods. So that's also a process.
So what will happen is we will provide a rod kit, which is basically a blank, and we will provide all of the components, and they will end up tying all of those components onto the fly rod, putting the reel seat on, the cork grip, and ultimately when they're finished, they get to keep the fly rod. We buy a reel then and the line and the backing so that it is a complete instrument and they can use it to fish with the flies that they've tied.
I know that there's a lot of people who are watching this that want more information, so we're going to put up your website on our screen. I want to thank you gentlemen so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you
Our
for the work
pleasure.
that
That was
you're
great.
doing. And thank you again for
Thanks
your
for having us.
service.
Thank you.
We're back after this.